This I did for Carnegie Hall. Oh, you want to tell me what you want?
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm actually here as an observer.
I mean, anything you want. And this is, let me show you Mrs.
This is the one I wanted him to bring.
Yeah.
Come on, Jim.
Mrs. Roosevelt. I used to do a lot of
Oh, that's
caricatures.
neat. That's a great one.
I really had a feeling for characters. I did quite a few professionally too.
This is what I had him
Oh,
bring.
yeah, this is,
VE Day in
I
Paris.
was in Paris, you see, for 9 months as an artist. And on VE Day, I went over the Champs-Élysées and it was just loaded with people celebrating for
That's
3 whole days.
Wonderful.
I rushed back to my studio, which wasn't too far, and just from remembering what I saw, I did this.
That's wonderful.
And I hadn't seen it in years, but it really puts across the idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, it's rough, you know, but
Yes, but
that's
that's fine.
part of it. Yeah, that's part of it.
Very joyful.
And colorful flags all over, and it really fantastic.
You had a pretty good military career.
Well,
Hold
I
it
was
still if
lucky.
she wants a picture of it, Ardis.
Oh, here you are. Did you take it?
I did take a couple.
Oh, sure.
You say VE Day, was that
Yes.
45?
Yeah, VE Day in Paris.
1945.
Yeah.
And,
Was it May, June 6th?
oh, I forget when it was
June
in that
6th.
area,
No,
but
May.
I can't remember just,
Because we were there,
Yeah.
we were in England on the 50th anniversary, and they interviewed him there.
Is that right?
anything else?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, not at all, not at all.
What is helpful for you if I don't use glass?
It's
Yeah.
whatever,
This one right here,
whatever works for
you
you.
did in, what year?
1943.
43, I think. I did so many in that area.
And you're donating it to the museum?
Yes, indeed.
Where are you
Oh,
donating?
wait a minute, he didn't donate it, your
My
nephew.
nephew, yes, I gave it to him.
He donated it.
Donating it.
When did you do that?
It was just donated, what?
Can I
A
say
couple weeks
today?
ago, wasn't it?
About a week ago.
Yeah.
Might as well say today.
I
Fine,
tried.
today, officially today is
Okay.
fine.
But his nephew isn't here. His nephew, did you get the,
No, I've not gotten it back yet.
Hey,
Forget
is
that
that,
date.
These
I can't
Hughes is
remember
there.
dates really.
I'm not gonna.
this was
Thank
a
you.
pretty strong message even today.
Well, you know, I did that, I think, I was in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, that was my basic training place. And they sent me to Baltimore, and then Washington. I was in Washington for a whole year doing artwork, and then they sent me to Paris for 9 months.
Yeah.
It is.
Imagine sending a young GI to Paris.
He went to the Salvation
Anyway,
Army and picked out
there was
long shirt
a
and tie and got a
general, he
coat.
was a friend of the colonel who was
He
responsible
doesn't
for my
remember who the
being
woman
there.
was.
And he looked at that and he said, that's a lot of power in those little paint. And I thought, gee, what a wonderful thing to say. What a lot of power in a little paint,
Absolutely.
you know.
That's what they used to do.
I just want to get one quick comment before, these guys are going to take over,
Yeah,
and I'll just
sure.
get comments from them.
Sure, okay.
But I did want to ask you one thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about its significance today after 9/11?
Selling bonds.
Not really.
Or is it more, is it
Well,
something that kind of sticks in your mind as World War II?
Well, I did, well, it does, really. I did so many things that I just almost forgot about it. I hadn't seen this in a long time, you know. Went through a lot of things, and since I got out in 46, you see, that's a long time ago. Yeah.
Observation, the veteran who was here, he was a Marine from Guadalcanal, served Palo. He said what bothered him about that painting.
I'll leave my beret on, it looks more like an artist.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, incidentally, I have a little something here, I put a tape on it. So I'll just turn my head a little. So.
You can't even notice it.
Oh, well, good, as long as it doesn't show.
No, that's fine.
People today are getting for 9/11. Because he said,
DJ
the policemen were getting paid to be there, so that was their job. and-
Are you with the paper, incidentally?
No, I work for the museum.
For what?
I work with the museum.
Oh, I see, yes. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Okay, so it's BJ.
30, 40.
Then it was D-Day.
And then we worked out a
That's a
program
D-Day.
too with
That was June 6th.
one school district, Road Free Academy, that did 36 for us this year.
Are you a historian? What's your
I
title?
Glad that you could come.
coordinated
Thank you.
program.
See you again.
I'm sure.
Just wondering how to
This
refer
has
to
been great fun.
Us journalists have to attach people to the
Program coordinator.
Program coordinator.
You know, I took this to the Saturday Post to show them I do covers.
You're tough, I like that.
And I had made a lot of sketches. Well, I came back about, just a few months later, on the Saturday Post, they got one of their artists who just copied my picture.
Oh,
They had a fella standing by a bus stop,
That was the same.
you know, wanting to get a ride, but I left the original, I left the copy with them, and they just copied it.
And the one veteran.
You hold the umbrella?
I've had that happen a lot, really, people stealing my ideas, a lot, really. But it doesn't bother me, I wouldn't do anything, because I don't want to get involved, it upsets me too much, I just forget about it.
Thank you.
I can understand that.
Yeah,
And then he said
yeah.
sometimes they see the guys, my guys lying in snow.
So what's your job, just to facilitate discussion?
Yes. Yeah, I think as an interviewer, I try to stay out of it as much as possible.
Is this the oldest subject you've ever had?
Pardon?
Is this the oldest subject you've ever had?
No, we've done 2 World Wars,
3.
1 veterans.
Artist, how old
Is
are
this your
you?
first
90,
artist?
I was 90, January 3rd.
Actually not. We had
I can't believe it, born in 1912, 3 months before the Titanic went down, really. And there were no radios, they didn't come until 10 years later.
We didn't hide.
Imagine, I can't believe this. What happened in the last century is unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
Book covers and articles for articles, illustrated articles for Civil War.
Has anybody dropped a white camera
Yeah,
It's going to be towed
right now?
right now, I'm sorry. They've just given us notice they want to tow it away from the sports store.
What's the time to move it?
Walking distance. Do something about the parking here.
Yes, I know, that's,
That's been a problem.
Yeah. Oh, it's a problem every place. In Europe, all the cities are just choked with traffic.
Stage and not in the actual.
Every place is just too many cars.
Parking
Yes.
out of business.
I guess.
And it's getting worse.
It's getting worse, you're right about that. It's absolutely
I
awful.
was asking them if they knew of any place for me to park there.
they have very few
Well,
parking
Street.
spaces there.
Oh, they did? Oh, that wasn't it.
This is an interview with Ardis Hughes, Friday, the 13th, September 13th, 2002, approximately 10:45 a.m. at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. The interviewer is Michael Russert. Could you tell me your full name, your date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My full name is Ardis William Hughes. We have to have a William in our name. I was born in Rhinebeck on the Hudson, January 3rd, 1912.
Okay. Prior to your service in the military, what was your educational background?
Well, after high school in Oneonta, 1930, I went to Pratt Institute Art School in New York, which is a well-known school, and I did art, figures, everything. It was strictly art, which I wanted, incidentally. My father wanted me to go to college, get a degree, but I absolutely refused that. So after graduating in 1934, my only living was what I earned as an artist. So I did illustrations for years, all figure work. And I apprenticed with a famous illustrator,
Who was that?
Saul Tepper. And on that street, which was West 67th Street, it's just 2 blocks from the Lincoln Center, which I saw from the beginning to the finished Lincoln Center. There were beautiful studios, and as a result, all these famous illustrators were there who were my gods when I was a student, and I got to know them. and that was a wonderful experience, just being in that environment.
Who were some of the illustrators that most influenced you?
John Gannum, who was absolutely fantastic, and Walter Biggs was another one. He was originally from Virginia, I think, and Dean Cornwell, who was one of the outstanding illustrators in the country, and Gilbert Bundy from Kansas City. He did a lot of work for Esquire magazine. His brother, in fact, worked in Esquire, which I did for a little while in their art department. And he became quite well known. So being in that environment, in retrospect, to me, it was just great because you were exposed to all this wonderful work. I did everything for Mr. Tepper except do the painting. And they were, boy, if he had a story from the Saturday Post, getting the material for the story, he wanted hundreds of things, you know. But they were great artists, really. And unfortunately, illustration just disappeared as time went on. And it's a shame because they were marvelous artists. They knew figures so beautifully and composition. And sometimes people look down their nose at illustration.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to save it, but do you think an illustrator is an artist?
By all means. And when these people annoy me when they have this attitude. And I told them, I was in Rome and I went to the Vatican and I went into the Sistine Chapel, and here on the ceiling were illustrations by Michelangelo, all illustrating the Bible. But, you know, even in the Louvre in Paris, there's one tremendous room. Rubens did the life of Marie de Medici. They were all illustrations of her life. There were 19 of them, tremendous ones in this particular room.
So you were working in December of 1941. What can you tell me about when you heard about Pearl Harbor? Where were you? What was your reaction?
I forget if I was home or when I came home, of course, everything was Pearl Harbor. And that's where I knew about it. And of course, I was 30 at the time, so I knew I was destined for the military. So in 1942, I went to Fort Belvoir, just outside of Alexandria, Washington.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Believe me, they had to grab me. And I went to the basic training. It was basically infantry and engineering, basically. So I think it was, I forget, maybe 4 months maybe of basic training. And after that, there was a art center in the camp. And there were a lot of recreation halls that were devoid of any ornamentation. So this art center did paintings, large ones, to put in the recreation hall. And I became part of that.
How were you picked to do these paintings? How were you assigned to that duty?
Well, every day during my basic training, I just went to this art center. So I was there, you see, every day. And when I finished my basic training, they assigned me. There were about a dozen altogether. And I did these things. They were about 10 feet long, of GIs doing all sorts of things characteristic of the camp program. So I was very lucky, of course. And then someone in Washington, I think they were acquainted with what the artists were doing, and they took me. And I was in Baltimore, and they gave me a room in the Munson Museum, which was wonderful. And that's where I did this, incidentally. And then Washington, D.C., I was there a whole year.
How many of the paintings that you did were used for either bonds or for
Well,
recruiting purposes, propaganda
Well,
purposes?
I forget how many. I did a few, not a lot, but I did a lot of things for the federal employees, trying to encourage them to contribute money for war bonds. And they put out a publication every week, I think, and I did all the artwork, covers and everything. And also I did a oil painting 16 feet long, showing the federal employees looking up at the sky with all of these airplanes going over. In other words, they were responsible for buying all these airplanes. And they had a big exhibition in front of the Washington Monument. And they built a special stage for this painting I had done. And then one of the radio personalities would come on and say, Sergeant Ardis, Hughes, blah, blah, blah. And so it was there for quite a while. And then it landed in the Pentagon. They had it at the entrance of the Pentagon. What happened to
I
it?
was just going to ask you that.
I haven't any idea whether they still have it or not. So that was interesting too, wasn't it?
Yes.
And as a result, they got rid of all the GIs in Washington. There was a lot of pressure about, fellas in Washington having a soft job and so on. So they got rid of all of it. They sent me back to Fort Belvoir. They didn't know what to do with me. And one of my posters was hanging in the platoon. And they sent me out on around the camp picking up cigarette butts. And I mean, this was so ridiculous. Here I was doing things like this, you see. So I went in and saw the lieutenant in his room, and my poster was there. They knew about me. I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. Here I am picking up cigarette butts, and he just laughed. He thought that was so funny. So they put me in basic training again. So I went down to the Pentagon, and I knew a fellow from New York. He was an older fellow. He wasn't in the military, but he did a lot of posters for the medical part of the Army. And he introduced me to the department that handled all the painters and entertainers all over the world. And of course, he knew about me. My painting was there and my poster. And without hesitating, he said, where do you want to go, New York or Paris? I said, oh, Paris. So that's what happened.
Now, what was your assignment when you were there?
Oh, I did everything. They put out a publication for the GIs, and I did illustrations for it.
Okay. Let's talk about this.
Yes.
I'll bring it over. I should try to put it over closer before. Okay, this being one of your examples of your work.
Yes, yes indeed.
Okay, when did you do this painting?
You know, as far as dates, I don't
Okay.
know. It was probably
I'm sorry.
It was probably around 1943.
Okay, so you were still working in Washington at that time?
This I did in Baltimore. I was there a few months, and then Washington wanted me, and so I was sent there I was there a whole year.
Okay. Now, as an example of one of your works, what was your specific assignment when you were given this? And how much latitude did you have?
I had complete latitude. All of these were completely my ideas. Completely.
Did they
And
tell
maybe
you?
I made a little sketch just to show them, and oh, that's fine, so I did it.
So they basically said, we want you to do something for the National Service Life Insurance, but you can do...
Well,
whatever.
they wanted posters which were reproduced and sent
Right.
all over the world to the
Right.
Army camps to induce the GIs to buy war bonds. And that's the reason for these, you see. So they were sent all over. My brother from Oneonta, used to get letters from kids all over the world saying your brother's poster is hanging in our platoon.
Well, who did you pick as models for this?
Well, this is interesting. I needed a figure for the model. I told you I was in a room in the Munson Museum.
Right.
So I went to these down and out people, Red Cross, I forget what it was, and there was several men, and this fellow was there, and I thought, well, gee, he's great. So I had him come to the Munson Museum several times, and I painted directly. And he was great, and of course we paid him, I forget what it was, of course, but he was delighted, because he was one of these vagrants who had nothing. But he was a very good type, and he posed for me.
Did you use a model for the woman, or did you?
I forget about the woman, whether I made sketches, I honestly can't remember that. I probably made sketches of somebody, but I honestly don't remember that.
Why did you pick this particular format when you did this? It's so somber and yet so powerful.
Well, that's characteristic of a situation like this, isn't it? I mean, I can't imagine a greater tragedy than a situation like this. So I tried to respond to that particular incident, you see, and this was the result.
What was the reaction when this
Well,
was completed?
I think a general had seen this. There were military men. The colonel, who was my sponsor, he knew all of them, from Fort Meade. And he looked at it and he said, that's a lot of power in a little paint. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to say. How descriptive that is, what a lot of power in a little paint. It's perfect, actually. I thought that was just marvelous to get a response like that. And they used it in the Smithsonian, I told the girl who wrote the article.
Now, do you know how many of your paintings were used for posters?
I don't know, because I did them and then they were gone, and I really don't know.
Did you ever keep a catalog of your sketches?
Oh, no, but I have them all over. They're stuck away in a closet in New York, I guess, and once in a while we run across something, and I haven't seen it in 40 years, really.
Now, where was this painting?
It was in New York, wasn't it? Oneonta, yeah, that's my brother's home. He had it. It was in the attic there. They all.
You mentioned in your this individual record form that you did a painting of George Gordon Meade for Fort Meade.
This was an interesting story. They wanted a picture. Fort Meade wasn't far from from Washington, actually. So they wanted a portrait of Meade. Apparently they didn't have anything. So I went to the archives in Washington where they had photos by the Civil War. Matthew Brady, I think
Yes.
he was the official photographer. And I ran across some pictures of General Meade, and I had them enlarged. He had a beard, that always helps. And the material was great. And they told me that his grandson is in Philadelphia, works in a bank. So I went up there, and it was just a little bank on a side street. And I went in and I asked, I'd like to see Mr. Meade. Well, in front of the vault, there was a table, and here was Mr. Meade sitting in front of the vault. So I went over and introduced myself, and I asked about his well, I don't know much about my it was that sort of, I don't know much about my grandfather, so on. But he said my grandfather's uniform is in a museum here in Philly. a little museum. So I went down there, and that was a great help because they had the whole thing, the hat, and I made sketches and color sketches, you see, which is very important. So that was a big help, I must say, just being exposed to that uniform. But that was very funny that I expected a very vigorous man, you know, like the general probably was, and he was just completely the opposite.
What would you say was the, excuse me, most interesting painting that you worked on?
Oh gosh, I don't know, I've done so many. Really, I honestly can't answer that. I've done so many, and then I forget about them, really. And,
Well, there's this one that, here in this article, what can
yeah.
you tell us about that?
Well, I was interested in covers. I hadn't done them really, and I thought I'd do one. And when I finished it, I went to Liberty magazine, and they took it immediately. And I use these ideas are all mine, of course, and I use the son of Mr. Tepper, the illustrator, who was a teenager, and then I forget, I must have made sketches of this, and then I put the names of all my friends on. It was a cute idea, standing by the side of the road, and the car had just gone by, obviously. And I went down to the Saturday Post, and I made a lot of little sketches of ideas. And nothing happened, but I left this Liberty cover there. And just a few months later, they had one of their artists copy this, and for the Saturday Evening Post, some man standing by a bus stop trying to, with the day's file. So they just copied this idea. But I've had that happen many times. But I don't want to get involved in it would upset me too much, actually. I just forget about these things.
Okay, let's go back to when you went to Paris. What were you doing in the Army in Paris?
Well, the Army put out a publication,
Okay, yes, you mentioned that.
and I did illustrations for it. I guess it was a weekly, I can't remember. So one time they sent me to a prisoner of war camp in Compiègne, which is north of Paris. That's where the First World War Treaty was signed, incidentally. And they had a lot of these young kids. At the end of the war, they took everybody. And they were just little, actually 15-year-old kids. Put them in the Army. And they were part of the concentration camp, but they separated them from the other soldiers. And so I did several sketches of these fellas. This was the story, actually. Excuse me. And they were scared to death. They were the enemy, and they were defeated, you see. And here I was, the kid was so scared he didn't even blink his eye. So that was sort of funny, you know. Yeah. So we had a few assignments. We went further into Germany, and these towns were kaput, you know, just bombed completely, and people were living down in the cellar. And that was interesting too, because they're all built up modern now. I haven't seen that. Frankfurt the same way. So that's the way it was. And but that was a wonderful experience, you know, and I was very fortunate, and certainly was, to be able to continue art. But if I had got in at 18, this wouldn't have happened. You see, I had several years of doing professional figures, and evenings I was always going to sketch classes practically every night of the week, just drawing from the model, because I love it. I did that for 40 years. So, but art is everything to me, really. Art is my life and always has been. For some reason, because I came from an environment with nothing. There was absolutely nothing in my family. In fact, my father tried to dissuade me and never accepted me. If I wasn't making a lot of money, I was a flop to him. So, which was a shame, really. But
Why do you think you selected art?
it was something in here, I didn't select it, really. As I said, there was absolutely nothing in, it was Oneana, nothing in the town nor in my family. And as a kid, I just, after dinner, I'd go up to my room and did something. So I can't explain that.
When
But-
did you leave the service?
I left in 4 years after, it was 1946, in March, I think. I was just shy of 1 month, completing 4 years.
Okay, how do you, I think you partially answered this, but how did your time in the military service have an effect on your life?
Well, may I say from the beginning that the furthest thing from a military person
Well,
is
yes,
an
I know
artist. The furthest, really. But,
Well, how about the experiences then that it gave you?
well, you know, Rembrandt could have gotten the army and he'd be a private for 4 years, believe me. But of course, if you're a doctor, you're immediately a captain or something, because that's important to the army, whereas art isn't. Or if you're a leader of a lot of men, of course, these are the people they want. And an artist is completely different from that. So the military to me is, you know, and but yeah, I was very fortunate, and they were very nice. And
Do you have some sketches and so on that you wanted to show us?
oh, well, yes.
Wayne will be able to pick them up on the camera. So.
Well, the first one I'll show you, I was in Paris on VE Day. And our place wasn't too far from the Champs-Élysées, so I went over there and it was packed with people celebrating. There were flags all over. And it was absolutely tremendous. For 3 whole days they just took over Paris. I rushed back to my studio, and just from memory, I did something very quickly. And I have a sketch, we ran across it. I hadn't seen it in years. And I think Phyllis found it. So let me show it to you. And although it's very rough, it puts across the idea. Yeah.
What were you trying to show in this painting? Of course, I
Just
think you can see it.
just the spirit of the moment, that's all, and the celebration and the feeling that they had after those years of war. I mean, fortunately Paris was not bombed. I understand Hitler wanted to bomb it, but there was a German general who refused that, and fortunately it wasn't hit, because so many cities were, you know.
Now, did the government supply you with all of your paints and your canvases?
Yes, of course they did, yes. But I was always sketching when I wasn't working for the army. I was always in Paris making sketches of people at cafes and up in Montmartre where all the artists are, and always making sketches.
Do you have any other paintings that you did or sketches while you were there?
I don't have them here, no.
Okay.
I
didn't know if you...
I have, let's see, here is one of the posters, another poster I did. Hit them harder. And this is interesting. Irving Berlin wrote a musical for the Army. He also wrote one for the First World War. This is the Army. And I went to the opening in Baltimore. And in the last scene, Irving Berlin, he's a little fellow, he was dressed in a World War I uniform. He comes out on the stage, and there were pup tents all around him. And he sings in an awful voice, of course, "Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning," which to me is one of the greatest lyrics ever written. What a marvelous lyric. And the colonel, this picture was on the back of the program, the full page on the back of the program, and the colonel wanted a picture of me with Irving Berlin. He made an appointment, and at the last minute, it was canceled. So this painting was at the theater. So after the show, I went backstage and picked up my painting, and I was passing a room, the door was open, here was Irving Berlin taking the goo off his face, and he saw me and he sort of bowed, you know. But that was interesting too.
Now, why did you select that particular?
I don't know.
idea?
I don't know really, because all of them just came, and it's possible I made little sketches to show them, but they were all my ideas. And I always did the lettering, and in Oneonta, before going to New York, there was a sign shop in Oneonta, and I used to hang around there to meet a great artist. You know, actually, he wasn't very good, but I learned to do signs, and at nights I practiced show cards. You see S's and O's and so on, and in a little while I was doing them professionally for. So that background, and then when I came home during the summer, I worked in the sign shop for 3 months, which was wonderful, and I earned money too, and that helped pay for my going to art school in New York. And I never regretted that experience with lettering. I'm certainly not a great letterer, but I can do things that look professional with spacing and so on, which is very important. So I never regretted that, because all the things I do a lot of times, there's lettering, a lot of the shops on the main street here. And I've done a lot of them, and they're, you know, there's always lettering. Oh, this. I was always sketching when I was in Pratt. In the early 30s, I went out to Coney Island. I went out to Coney Island just to sketch. And here is one I did it in Coney Island. Isn't that typical of Coney? And
Or any beach.
yeah, any beach. But these things were stuck away, you know, and we'd see them 40 or 50 years later. This I did for Carnegie Hall. That was on the cover of their program. And this is
Well, let me get a
We'd like
nice
to
shot
get
of
the
this.
color.
Oh, I see, okay.
This is Rose.
Oh, yes, I love doing caricatures. And I have one I did of Mrs. Roosevelt. Because they're all done from photos, of course, but I love doing caricatures. Okay?
Yep.
So let me show you Mrs. Roosevelt. And I did some professionally too. Billy Rose had a nightclub on, just off Times Square. And one of the newspapers asked me to go there, and they had an entertainer called a potato peeler. And they wanted a sketch of him, so they gave me a seat right up in front. It was just an improvised stage, not very high. And here was a potato peeler peeling potatoes, you see. And of course he had a lingo, constant lingo. And he asked the fella to come up on the stage. So this young fella came up, and he plasters him with shaving cream. And the fella standing there in the potato peelers, peeling potatoes, he says, "That's all, brother, that's all." And the fella standing there, you see, with all this, and the potato peeler said, "That's all, that's all." Well, after the show, he comes down and he sits across from me in the table, and I made several sketches. And what was very funny, at the end, I put his name down, and I said, "Nationally known comic." He says, "No, internationally known." I'll never forget that, internationally known. At another time, I knew someone, she was in a musical review put out every year, this Leonard Sillman. Every year he had a new musical, and she was in the chorus. And she asked me to come down, and they wanted a big poster and with caricatures. And Emma Jean Coca was the star. She was just starting, and Rags Raglan, the male, he died quite young. But after the show, I went in the dressing room, and Emma Jean Coca sat there while I was doing the sketch, and then I went home and did the poster, you see, from my sketches. But that was interesting too. That was before she was ever known, really. I've had so many experiences like that. When you're around 100 years. You're like, yeah.
Okay.
This is interesting too.
Yep, we're going.
When I went to Washington, the Army had built temporary barracks right on the side of the White House, on the White House ground. And all the fellas in this particular place guarded the White House.
Mike, where's Fort McCann? Excuse me? Where's Fort McCann?
We're taping.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And they guarded the White House. And eventually, Mrs. Roosevelt invited all the GIs. I just had my sleeping and eating facilities there to the White House. So I went over and she took us all over the White House. I walked with her. She's way up here, you know. So that was interesting too. And that's one of the interesting experiences. So I've had so many.
After the war, did you ever make use of the GI Bill for?
Yes, I did. There was a art unit in New York, and they, I guess they took advantage of that GIs had money, and so I just went there a couple times a week because it was free, you see, and it was drawing from the model, and then there was a famous artist who was a teacher, and of course it's always good to be exposed to them. So that was interesting too. Yes, I did take advantage of it. Not that I really had to, but it was available, so I took advantage of it.
Do you have any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for...
Do you want to show us maybe
Well,
some of
these
the others?
well, I was always sketching, and I lived across the park, Central Park, from the Central Park Zoo. Way back they had all the big animals. They don't anymore. So I used to go over there a lot, and here are some of the sketches. I did hundreds of them, I guess. And these I did right on the spot, you see, directly with a pen. This was very powerful. So, and this is things I did here, Menzies and Curtis.
Oh, yes.
And this is where lettering came in handy. This is exactly what I was alluding to. And this is the down near Eddie Bowers, the flower shop. And this is up on North Broadway. I've done a lot up there. I have several more to do up there, actually.
Now, you still are painting?
Every day. This is in the park, of course. I've done many of those. They sell just like that. And this is the Saratoga Arms. She wanted a winter scene. I did another scene. She put it on a card. So, oh, this is in St. Augustine. They have an old section which they reproduce some of the early things, and I did several there, and they had the people in costume. So that was interesting. This was in the park, Congress Park, and just a scene with the ducks, and I stuck this in the new carousel. Of course, I happened to be there, and it fitted. So, but I do everything, really everything I've done. I've done oil portraits for New York University of professors. And I've done absolutely everything, but I never wanted to do just portraits, let us say. I wanted to do everything.
Thank you for sharing your career with us.
It was much more painless than I anticipated.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. Washington, they had camouflage down there. So they thought artists would fit into that because I had nothing to do with that. But that's one of the reasons there were several artists who were sent to Fort Belvoir. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank
Yeah.
you very much, sir.
And Winslow Homer, you know, he covered the Civil
Civil
War.
War,
He was
yes,
an illustrator.
Yes.
And he
Harper's and so on.
oh,
yes.
all of them, yeah. And he became one of the outstanding artists.
Yes.
And he was an illustrator. These people who look down their nose at illustration, believe me, I knew the top people and they were fantastic and much greater than a lot of the so-called modern artists. You know, a lot of them can't even draw, I'm sure, so they drip paint on a canvas and they get millions of dollars for it too.
By any chance, did you ever meet Norman Rockwell?
Yes, once I did. The Four Freedoms that he did. They were exhibited all over the country, and their first place was Washington, D.C., and the colonel invited me to go there, and Rockwell was there and shook hands with people. So that's the only time I saw him, because he lived out in Vermont and outside the city. He actually came from New York, you know, but
Yes, I knew.
he wanted to go to these places where the common people were, and so he took advantage of that, which was understandable
Yes.
for, you know. So anyway,
Thank you very much.
Okay.
so
Thank you.
I hope it works out all
It did.
okay.